The Magic Mountain is a German novel written by Thomas Mann, published in 1924. Today it's widely regarded as one of the most influential works in German literature in the past century. Hans Castorp, described in the book as an ordinary man, goes to visit his cousin Joachim in a tuberculosis sanatorium in Davos, Switzerland, of conspiratorial fame. He only plans to stay for 3 weeks, but he ends up staying for 7 years. He meets many different characters, generally each representing a different ideology. And so in this book, during this time, the reader is invited to reflect upon various themes, including nationalism, humanism, Marxism, time, love, desire, death, so much more. It's such a rich book. The discussions on these subjects are sometimes actually quite long. Sometimes when I was reading the book, it felt as though the story in the background was merely just a backdrop, really, to be able to have all these philosophical discussions. In general, each character represents different sets of ideologies, and the author makes them converse together. And so you can see the ideologies pitted against each other, and they each throw their arguments at each other, and so the reader can come to a conclusion by himself on these ideas. This is definitely not one of those books that you read fast. It's definitely one of those books that you take your time to really understand. For myself, I took about a year to read it. I don't know about you guys, but I always like to have different books going on at the same time, depending on what I feel like reading. And this was my book that I kept for nighttime, when I could really focus on the book, when the house was completely silent, and I can just concentrate on what I was reading. It's a bit of a heavy read. What really sets this book apart, though, is the richness of the ideas presented. I've never read anything like it. The book requires a solid general culture to be able to really appreciate, and I am sure that a lot of things went over my head that I didn't fully understand, but it's definitely one of those books that you read more than once, and that every time you read it, you'll get something new out of it. I'm still happy I read it, though, and I recommend it if you like books that really force you to think. It's said that this book is a classic example of wait, sorry, my German, I speak no German whatsoever. Bildungsroman, which means novel education or novel of formation. And so this was a kind of book that they used to write where they would use the setting as a way to explore various ideas, and that this book is in some way a kind of parody of that style, but it works really well, and the array of ideas explored is incredible. As an aside, I mean, except for like the little mini discussions that happen all throughout the book, the actual story, I thought it was really interesting to see how the upper classes of that period used to live. So this was before the First World War, and so you have all these rich people who don't need to work. They just live off, various rents and things, as you often see in other novels. I'm thinking of, for example, The Count of Monte Cristo, which I read at about the same time, where people they don't work, they just live off money being produced, which I guess still exists today, but less so. It seemed like it used to be quite common. And so what these people used to do was that they would, when they had tuberculosis, which at that time was a total plague, and it killed a bunch of people before the advent of antibiotics, they would go to the sanatoriums where the air was said to have healing properties. And so in this particular case, the sanatorium is called the Berghof. It's in the mountains and it's high up, and so it's very cold and the air is very thin. And so what they would do was that they would just eat. They would eat really good food, like they're always eating in the book. And then they would go on these things called rest cures, where they would basically just go lie down in the cold with a blanket. As you can imagine, this was a good terrain to start thinking of a bunch of things. It's also really interesting to see, they're just starting to have those medical technologies. So they had just invented, or x-rays are just starting to be used. So you can see that they're all interested with the x-rays. They're also doing these weird surgeries that I guess still exist today, but I imagine we do them better. But so anyway, you have all these sick people, but they don't really talk that much about how they're sick. But every once in a while, like, oh, this person died, because, you know, they're all sick, they're in a sanatorium. And so it's just very strange to see how they react to that, and how it almost seems as though to somehow compensate for that death setting that they're surrounded in, they kind of start to live the good life with like the eating and the activities and the fun and the balls and all kinds of things. All in all, I would say that this book is definitely not for the faint-hearted, but if you manage to get through it, it's really one of those books that stay with you and that you won't forget. So recommended. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.